Hello and welcome. So, picture this. It's the summer of 1549, and thousands of ordinary people, we're talking farmers and miners in the west of England, just took up arms against their king. It turned into one of the absolute bloodiest uprisings of the entire Tudor era. So what on earth could push them to risk everything? Well, today we are going to investigate the explosive rebellion that set the entire West Country ablaze.
Right, let's jump straight in. This single demand, pulled directly from the rebels' own list of grievances, really gets us to the heart of the whole thing. It is a powerful, defiant cry for the old ways, smack in the middle of a time of radical change. You can just feel the stage being set for this massive clash between faith, tradition, and the power of the state.
And I really want to stress, we're not talking about some small little riot here. No way. This was a full-on insurrection. You had an army of commoners laying siege to Exeter, the biggest, most important city in the region, for over a month. These people were organized, they were determined, and they absolutely shook the government in London to its very core.
And that right there, that's the big question for us today. What could possibly drive regular people, farmers, miners, tradesmen, to pick up weapons and fight the king's forces? Was this a holy war for their Catholic faith? Was it a desperate scream against economic oppression, or maybe a protest against the corrupt and failing government? Well, you know what? We're going to follow the clues and find out.
Okay, so to really get why this explosion happened, we first have to understand the tinderbox it was set in. And that means we need to rewind the clock just 2 years, to the moment when a 9-year-old boy, Edward VI, inherited the throne from his, well, larger-than-life father, Henry VIII.
So, Henry VIII's break with Rome had already thrown the entire kingdom into religious chaos. The whole dissolution of the monasteries thing, that had massively shifted who owned the land and the wealth. And now, you've got a child on the throne, so England is being ruled by this council, led by a guy called the Lord Protector, the Duke of Somerset. It was just this volatile mix of political uncertainty and simmering social unrest.
And what's so fascinating here is how you can see the kingdom being pulled in two different, really powerful directions at the same time. On one hand, the new government, full of zealous Protestants, was just flooring it, pushing for super rapid religious change, way more radical than anything Henry had done. And at the exact same time, the country's in the grip of this terrible economic crisis that's making life just unbearable for ordinary people.
Okay, so our first clue. This one lies in what was probably the single most dramatic religious change of the era. The introduction of a brand new book. A book that would fundamentally change the spiritual life of every single person in England.
So, on Whitsunday, 1549, every single church in England was ordered, by law, to start using this book. And look, this wasn't just about translating the service from Latin into English. Oh no! This was a complete and total replacement of 1,000 years of religious practice, and it was absolutely non-negotiable.
And this table just perfectly illustrates how deep these changes really went. The old Latin Mass with all its mystery and ancient rituals, gone. In its place, you get a much simpler service in English. And crucially, the core belief in transubstantiation, the miracle at the very heart of the Mass, where bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, that was basically removed. For so many people, this wasn't just a different service, it felt like a totally different religion.
And this is the key insight from a historian like Eamon Duffy. From his perspective, the rebellion was about so much more than just the words in a prayer. It was a defense of their entire identity. Think about it. The rituals of the old church marked everything. The passing of the seasons, the milestones of life, from baptism all the way to burial. To have all of that stripped away by some distant government in London, well, it must have felt like an assault on their very way of life.
But faith wasn't the only thing on their minds, not by a long shot. Let's move on to our second clue and see how this all starts to build, because this revolt was also born out of just sheer, grinding economic desperation.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 35%. According to historian R.W. Hoyle, the crippling taxes from the last few years of Henry VIII's reign might have wiped out as much as 35% of what ordinary people owned. They were already pushed right to the very edge before Edward even came to the throne.
And on top of that, they were facing this crushing combination of economic pressures. Landlords were fencing off common land, which meant people couldn't graze their animals anymore. Rents were absolutely skyrocketing, and then, as if things weren't bad enough, Somerset's government comes in with this deeply unpopular new tax on sheep. People put the blame squarely on the local gentry, seeing them as nothing but greedy opportunists getting rich while the poor suffered.
I mean, that language is just incredibly powerful, isn't it? As historians like A.F. Pollard and Andy Wood have pointed out, this basically frames the whole rebellion as a kind of class war. The rebels didn't just see the gentry as landlords. They saw them as a class of oppressors, inflamed with greed, who were actively trying to destroy the common people.
So we've got religious outrage and we've got economic desperation. Our final clue points to the third key ingredient in this explosive mix, a total breakdown in the relationship between the people who ruled and the people they were ruling.
Just think about this chain of command for a second. First, the king is a boy. Then his regent, Somerset, is widely seen as arrogant and his policies are a mess. Then the local gentry, the very people who are supposed to be carrying out the king's justice, are the same people the commons blame for all their problems. The entire system, from the very top to the bottom, just seemed completely broken.
Now this is a really crucial distinction to make. The rebels were not trying to overthrow the monarchy. In their own minds, they saw themselves as loyal subjects of King Edward. The way they saw it, the king had been sort of hijacked by these corrupt advisors like Somerset and all the greedy local gentry. Their rebellion was an attempt to save the king from these evil counselors and bring back true justice.
So, after looking at all the clues, what's the verdict? Was it about God? Was it about greed? Or was it about government? Well, the most compelling answer is, it was about all three of them, all hitting at the exact same time.
So here's the thing. You just can't pull one single cause out of the mix. This rebellion was a toxic cocktail. The religious changes gave them the moral outrage, right? A banner to rally under. The economic crisis gave them the desperation, the fuel for the fire. And the political weakness at the top meant there was no safety valve, no way to release the pressure. It all just fed into each other, creating this unstoppable chain reaction. But hey, how do we even know all this stuff? Well, it's thanks to sources like this guy, John Hooker. Now, Hooker was no neutral observer, not at all. He was on the government side, he was inside the city of Exeter while it was being besieged, and he absolutely hated the rebels. But here's the fascinating thing for a historian. His bias doesn't make his account useless. In fact, because he was there, his account is filled with priceless details about the siege that we just can't get anywhere else. The key is to read it critically, to separate the facts he's recording from the pretty venomous opinions he has.
Ultimately, the Western Rebellion of 1549 really is this powerful lesson from history. It shows us what can happen when all these deep-seated grievances, spiritual, economic, and political, all boil over at the same time for a population that feels like it has no other way to be heard. It's a question that really echoes far beyond the Tudor age, and it's a stark reminder that the past is never really past.